a national debt card on the backs of young people. And that's really what I see right now in America as the biggest issue. Are we burdening your generation, you, the young people, with debt from the past? Not only the debt that we know, treasury bills. You know, when there's a deficit, you've heard of the raising the national debt, right? Well, when they talk about that debt, they're talking about the treasury bills we've put out to raise money to balance the budget. They're not talking about what we owe for Social Security, what we owe for Medicare. And forget about Medicaid, that's mainly a state program, but that money comes from the federal government. If you add it up, those things that are off the books, you're talking about much more than the issue of the treasury bills. That's only $15 trillion. And by the way, that number is going on $16 trillion by the end of this year. And guess what's coming up at the end of this year? Another vote to raise the debt ceiling. It's probably going to happen after the election. But think about the fact that when you add up everything using the right accounting system, there's another at least $45 trillion that's not on the books. So you have a total of $60 trillion. There it is. The global debt bond, the fiscal unsustainability of the West. And if you read the papers just yesterday, I always come prepared with the most recent things that I see in the newspapers to let you know this is not history. This is not Joe DioGuardi just talking. Here's the New York Times yesterday. Front page. Fears rise that recovery may falter in the spring. Read this article yesterday. The good weather may have accelerated buying of cars, buying of homes, people spending, but all of a sudden, it's dropping. Why? Because we really don't have a good foundation yet in this economy. We've had an economy so far that was built artificially. Before the crisis in 2008, from 2002 to 2007, we had over $2 trillion in debt, people putting mortgages on their houses, calling them equity loans. And what did they do with the money? They bought SUVs, they went on vacation, they spent it. They didn't put it in the bank. So that created a nice big economy. But then it dropped. 2008, we found out that we were in a fiscal mess. And what then did we need to bail us out? We needed the federal government. Think about it. The people spent $2.7 trillion between 2002 and 2007, up to 2008, to create an economy. Now, what is America's economy based on? It's based on spending, consumption. We're not exporting. We do export, but we export less than we import. That's why China has such a big surplus against us. We've had kind of a false economy from 2002 to 2008. And then we needed this huge bailout. Now that $2 trillion was at least double what the governments put out in 2008 and 2009, especially, you know, with the TARP, the Troubled Asset Recovery Program. That was the main bailout. But what was the biggest part of the bailout? It was the Federal Reserve System increasing the money supply, so that you had money at a time when we could have been in a depression when there was no money, and they dropped the interest rate to practically zero. Banks can borrow from the Federal Reserve at 0.25%, and they can borrow from each other at less than 1%. And that allowed these banks to give out money cheaply. But did they do it? Not enough. We bailed out the banks, but the banks still have the problems with the housing. They did not modify those mortgages the way they should have. So why am I telling you all this? Because the story's not over. We've now created another artificial economy by bringing interest rates down to the lowest they've ever been, maybe in recent history. It's not going to last. That bomb, you know what the wick on the bomb is? Interest. Interest. We have now price controls like we had under Richard Nixon. Very difficult to come out when the government controls the price of things. And right now, the Federal Reserve has artificially controlled interest. God forbid it tries to go up, they call it quantitative easing. They go out and they buy treasury bills. Or they go out and put more money. Or they print it. Europe can't do that. They're trying to do it by putting a lot of money into the European Central Bank, but they don't have a Federal Reserve System. So they can't devalue their currency like we can. They can't just flood the markets with more money to reduce interest rates. So we don't know where Europe's going yet. The short-term measures have been good, and we are tied into Europe. If Europe goes down, we go down. We're now in a worldwide economy. It's no longer just the United States. So we got to be really thinking about where we're going. And I wanted to give you that message because it's going to be up to your generation to figure out how we get out of this mess. And so far, the Republicans and the Democrats have not been able to do it. This is the 4th year in a row that we have had no budget. Can you imagine a country this big without a plan? We've had no budget. That's how gridlocked, that's how locked up everything is politically. So, one party doesn't want to talk about tax increases, the other party doesn't want to talk about entitlements. And here we go. Everything comes down now to this election. This election in November has to happen for anything to happen. And you know where my heart is. We need Romney. He's going to be the, no matter what you think of him, he's the only one that can compete against Obama. I'm a conservative, but I'm a small government conservative. I ran that way from the beginning. Why do I say that? If you don't get government close to you, you can't control it. It becomes a huge bureaucracy. They hire their friends, their political patronage. Look what happened just now at the GSA. They had that big party in Las Vegas. They're firing people. Look at these Secret Service agents. They have the nerve to do crazy things on our money. You know, this is government. They figure it's not their money, but they don't realize it's our money. We got to get back to business principles. It's our money. It's got to be managed properly. It's got to be controlled. There's got to be checks and balances. There have to be outside audits. And we got to take numbers away from politicians. Right now, the accounting system is controlled by politicians. This is the problem we have. We need outside audits. And we need the right accounting system, generally accepted accounting principles, before you really know how bad it is. But the wick on that bomb is interest. And let me tell you why. Because right now, we don't have any fiscal policy. Fiscal policy has totally failed. Without a budget, you don't have any real fiscal policy. And what's fiscal policy? That's 1/2 of what we should need to run a government. It's called taxes and spending. Correct? That's fiscal policy. So you might say, well, Joe, without a budget, what do? They have something called a CR, continuing resolution. You just give the same money that you had last year. You can't plan for the future. Whatever money is needed, you kind of limp along short term just to keep the government going so it doesn't shut down. That's not the way to run a country that is as great as the United States of America. This is treasury bills. Who owns treasury bills? Remember I told you about the 15 trillion? This is really 10 trillion. Why is it only 10? Because $5 trillion of those treasury bills, the national debt, guess where it is? In the Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare. We took that money out already. We spent it. We put an IOU there. But look at this number at the end. Almost half, 45%. We're borrowing 45% from foreigners. 4.5 trillion. And look how much from China. 2 trillion. Can we put this great country in harm's way as a hostage to China? I hope not. So bottom line, let's get out of this, and you'll see it in my book, idea that we can keep spending money we don't have. Because when we spend money we don't have the assets to back it up, we're giving away America. And China knows how to plan. And China has a system, it's called communism, where you can control everything. Sure, there are millionaires there, because they've allowed people to become millionaires. But if they want to take a block away from somebody, because they want to put in something, they don't have something called eminent domain and you go to court. They have take it and that's it. Somebody resists, you throw them in jail. They've been a little careful about that because now the press is onto that a little bit. They don't want to seem like they're a communist state. But we don't have that kind of control. So we need a leader, and we don't want that kind of control. We want a real democracy, but we need a leader to take us forward. God bless you all. I hope to be around. I hope to be part of the, not elected, but I still have a good, I'm going to turn 72 this year, and I believe I got 20 good years left, and you're going to hear me giving this speech for 20 more years. Okay?